So, remember the 5th of November.
That's today.
Gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. In fact, I
Happy
know
Guy Fawkes
of
Day.
I know of no reason why it should not only never be forgot, but why it shouldn't be reenacted every year.
So it should be forgot and not forgot.
No, I know of no reason why it should never be forgot, is the
Mhm.
refrain.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know of no reason why it should not be reenacted every year, which it's not.
Okay, go on.
It should be
It
reenacted.
sounds like there's too many double negatives in there. I can't get my head around that.
Well, the little poem is
I know of no reason why it should never ever be forgot. So it ought to be remembered. That's what
I agree that it should be remembered, but I would add that it should be reenacted.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I know of
Reenacted.
I know of no reason why gunpowder treason should
Got it.
not be reenacted.
Okay. That's a very cryptic way of saying I won't even that.
No, I mean I'm not. I'm just saying that in the UK. I mean it's kind of out of fashion. It's out of fashion now. But for a long time in the UK, it was it wasn't Halloween. It was November the 5th. Was what kids got up to on around the evenings of around that evening. Or
Bonfire night, right?
Called it bonfire night, yeah. And it was you would they'd make up an effigy of Guy Fawkes, a dummy, put it in a wheelbarrow, and wheeled around asking to people's houses, saying penny for the guy, trying to get money, get a penny from people, and then they would this procession would culminate at a bonfire where they would burn the effigy of Guy Fawkes.
Oh, how come they asked for a penny for the guy?
Just because they wanted money.
Right. Okay. That's kind of the
Kind of
British
collect-
equivalent of trick or treating.
Yeah, well, except it's obviously predates
Yes.
that by a long time.
Unless there are older roots of that trick
Well,
or
but the
treating.
modern Halloween
Mhm.
tradition is like, a few decades old.
Right.
A handful of decades old. But
So it was so ingrained in Englishers, especially that
Yeah,
that
particularly.
Guy Fawkes was a peculiar person. That he ought to be his attempted assassination or destruction of Parliament ought to be remembered every year.
yeah, a day of infamy,
For
I think.
500 years? No,
Yeah.
430 years, 1605.
On which, it's in the rhyme, November. Remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason, and plot.
Mm-hmm.
I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. To remember,
Yeah.
to remind people that this was an infamous day when they tried to blow up Parliament, and they were obviously Catholics.
Yeah,
And
but that's what I'm getting at. What they're remembering, the thing that became a cultural, ingrained, everyone knows it kind of thing, like Santa Claus, is that there was a guy, they remember him as a terrorist, but no one ever mentioned what he was trying to do. He was trying to restore a Catholic monarchy.
Mm-hmm. And also under conditions of
So what
oppression,
that means
of
is
religion.
the
So-
Protestant status quo has remained in place
Yeah.
since that near attempt. And
Yeah.
the Protestants want everyone to remember that.
Yes.
That the Protestants, I mean, the
English,
the established,
Anglicans, whatever.
the status quo, and since
Yeah.
then. But they never articulate that that's why they're doing it. It's just become one of those things. Everyone knows Guy Fawkes, but they never know what it is politically that was
Yeah.
this close to happening. Was
Mostly.
the restoration of them
Yeah,
of what was normal for hundreds of years before that.
yeah, and
So
it was,
they are upholding a Protestant extremist
yeah,
takeover of their country,
yes, but that's because
which is now not extremist, but it's just the norm. But
majority are Protestants, so
they are now.
yeah.
They weren't then.
But also, it was in the
because the regime.
the attempt to blow up Parliament. The attempt to blow up Parliament was by Catholic, quote unquote terrorists who were, acting like you said to try and restore a Catholic monarchy in England, but also in the main point I think was in the context of the suppression of the practice of Catholicism in England, because of Protestant dominance. So it's a big story, obviously, with Protestant
Yeah.
Catholic wars religion in the UK. Civil war in England was fought over that. But anyway, I'm just saying. I hear that, I know that. I've watched V for Vendetta a lot of times.
Yeah.
I think I might have known the phrase beforehand anyway. And I just always thought that you should add that, you shouldn't forget the Gunpowder Plot. You should reenact it every fucking year. I mean, symbolically, obviously. Just instead of
that's the part you didn't say. Symbolically, right?
Well, it's a reenactment, right? It's a historical reenactment, right? And in fact, that's what they do. What they reenact is the killing of, or the execution of Guy Fawkes and the others that were involved. And I just think, well, if you're going to do a reenactment of it, reenact the whole thing, but maybe even throw in that he was successful. I don't know. It's just an idea. Anyway, people don't do Guy Fawkes anymore. They do in the UK. American culture has
taken over.
Has taken over quite a long time ago. I mean, it was like probably in the 80s and stuff. It was still a thing in the UK. It was still a bigger thing. The 5th of November was a bigger thing than the 31st, even though they went together. There was a bit of Halloween, but people in the UK, or in England in particular, would have been focused on the 5th of November as bonfire night.
It's interesting now that most people
switched.
would be familiar with it because of V for Vendetta.
Yeah, exactly.
Hollywood movie.
Yeah,
but set in Britain.
It takes Hollywood movies to educate people these days, apparently.
Okay.
But anyway, it's just in terms of, that was just a little aside, but in terms of, just so people who are listening, so they know, I'm wearing a keffiyeh, like it's not actually a Palestinian flag, it kind of, sort of is, it's basically a scarf, it's not a flag, it's a scarf, and it's not Palestinian, it's Arab. It was, people wore them on their head. I've got it in the wrong place. Should be on my head to protect me from the sun. That's all it is. Okay, it became a symbol of Palestinian resistance, etc., whatever, since the 1950s. It was actually a British guy who, at the time, who was, when the British Mandate in the late 30s and 40s, during the Arab-Israeli War. Just before that, the Brits were running Palestinians, basically, Palestinian troops from Jordan, which was under British mandate at the time, and it was a British general. His name was John Bagot Glubb. Anyway, he wanted to distinguish his Palestinian recruits from other Arab recruits, and so we had the Palestinians were the black and white keffiyeh, and others were red ones or whatever. So it was kind of like it was his. He made it basically a Palestinian thing. I mean, they took it up afterwards, or whatever, but he was the one who actually differentiated this black and white keffiyeh scarf as being representative of Palestinians. Because obviously there's different colours, different shapes, and they're all just worn on your head to protect from the sun, traditionally. But in terms of Palestinian resistance, it was actually a British guy who was the source of that. And what
am I wearing?
Do you ever see what do you call it? A famous Disney movie.
Disney movie.
Yeah.
The one with the elephant.
Yeah.
Dumbo.
What's that called? No, not Dumbo. No, you're Prince Ali from, what's it called? Scotty?
Prince Ali. Ali
What's the movie?
Ababa. Prince Aladdin.
Aladdin, for fuck's sake. Aladdin. There you go. You're Prince Ali. No. Okay, I'll just explain it.
So I get the girl on the magic carpet. That seems like a fair deal.
That sounds, yeah. Good luck with that. Anyway.
It's the hat. It's the hat what won her.
So I'm wearing the scarf we're going to have a discussion here on this topic of Israel and Palestine. I'm going to represent moderate Palestinian take, and you were meant to be representing the Israeli side.
Oh, Christ.
And to represent that, you were meant to bring a kippah or a yarmulke, right? But
we don't.
I don't think you knew what one of those was, and that was the closest you could get. Which might show a certain bias in a certain sense that we actually have a keffiyeh, a Palestinian keffiyeh, but we don't have a yarmulke.
We're actually trying to present both sides of the argument. This is not. Yeah.
It's.
So I get to play the Israeli set there.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus. Okay. Well. Okay. First point of debate. Then I propose that we nuke Gaza.
Yeah. Well,
that's literally what an Israeli government minister suggested this week. So
apparently,
that's the Israeli point. So what's your counterpoint?
Somebody said he was suspended for saying that.
Yeah, probably not.
You're meant to be. It's meant to be a moderate Israeli position.
Oh, Well, he is a government minister, so
Yeah,
I'm
well,
just
yeah.
Times of Israel. Check it out. He suggested nuking Gaza. Yeah, he did get reprimanded. I don't know if he was suspended, but
Yeah.
or it's interesting. The full quote is, "Why don't we nuke Gaza?" He gave a second option, or send them all to Ireland
Yeah.
or the desert. Ireland. Isn't that interesting? It's kind of like psychopathic. He knows enough
he's aware
about
of
the
it.
Irish
Well, he's
that
probably
they're
heard.
particularly supportive
But he may have just, I mean,
of Palestinian
he's
cause.
keeping an eye. Well, yeah, he probably knows that, and historically, and he knows that Irish politicians have been outspoken against the atrocities against my people. I mean, Palestinians.
And or he knows who are like taking in a lot of, how many, 100,000 Ukrainians? The Ukrainians are now the largest minority in Ireland since last year or something.
Yeah, not for long, maybe. We'll see. They might go back home soon. Maybe we'll start with that actually instead of Israel Palestine. You declared to me today that big news today was that Russia won. Ukraine lost and Russia won.
It's there were three key. Okay, so what it is there are three main reports. Okay, the first one is from the NBC. People probably saw this one because I think it got the most traction. NBC. So this is the American side last week. If you can put that up, Scotty. Headline is U.S. European officials broach topic of peace negotiations with Ukraine. Sources say. So the sources are undoubtedly CIA or something. The conversations have included very broad outlines of what Ukraine might need to give up to reach a deal with Russia. Give up? But I thought they were going to get it all back and push the barbaric Russians back to Moscow. Well, apparently not. And if you scroll down, I won't read the details. People know the gist of it.
Zelensky not happy.
I love the way they just opened up. He's not happy. Look how they opened up the first paragraph. U.S. and European officials have begun quietly, hushed, talking to the Ukrainian government about what
is that Zelensky?
possible
Can we talk about a surrender?
The conversations have included very broad outlines of what Ukraine might need to give up, i.e., they're not getting back those 4 oblasts, now Russian provinces. They're not getting them back, and they're saying here they're not getting them back. The talks, which officials described as delicate, a bit like quiet, they're delicate. They might blow over in the breeze any moment, took place last month.
That's too loud, Neil. Quietly.
During a meeting, blah, blah, blah. The discussions, and this is NBC's characterization, a correct one, very good. The discussions are an acknowledgement of the dynamics militarily on the ground in Ukraine and politically in the US and Europe. So, yeah, they knew it. We always knew they knew it. It's like that famous Solzhenitsyn quote. They're lying. We know they're lying. They know that we know they're lying. So,
Yep.
yeah. They, slaughtered basically the flower of Ukrainian youth for the sacrifice of, well, fuck all, militarily or politically, just really to get Russia to have it painted down in history as evil. And, of course, to make shitloads of money.
It was to rebuild America's industrial base, as what do you call him last week told us.
Biden.
No, the other guy.
Oh,
Transient ischemic attack.
the Secretary of State.
No, transient ischemic attack boy.
Transient ischemic. What?
The old fella.
The old fella, not Biden.
No, the older fella. Who has trouble in front of a camera too.
Rebuild America's industrial base.
He goes a bit...
Who? Come on.
I don't know his name. I can't remember his name.
Oh, you can't remember.
He goes a bit... he goes a bit kind of quiet during...
Oh, the Mitch McConnell, the head of whatever, the senior Republican senator.
Yeah, he said it last week. We played it last week. He said it was about rebuilding America's industrial base. That a significant portion of the money going to Ukraine, or that has been going to Ukraine, which is about $50 billion at this point, has stayed inside the country and is really good because it goes to our defence contractors. We're getting rid of we're shipping off all our old weapons stockpiles that have been rusting away or dusting away in storage for many years. We shipped all of them over and then we have to replace them, so it energizes the defence contractors. A lot of people
stimulates economic growth.
A lot of people are employed in America, like probably millions of people employed by defence contractors in the USA. So that's jobs for everybody, So it's all good. And sure, 500,000 Ukrainian people were killed, but that was their choice at the end of the day, you know. I mean, their choice based on lies and disinformation, but still their choice.
The second item is from CNN. Actually, no, it's CNN, but it's extensively quoting an interview in The Economist. So this is the British wing of the deep state. Headline, Ukrainians face grim reality of a prolonged war with Russia amid battlefield's stalemate. That sounds more like we expect it to continue on. But what it is actually, scroll down, is an interview with this guy who is still alive, it turns out. Zelensky, the head of the Ukrainian military, okay? They quote him as saying, basically completely contradicting Zelensky. In an interview with The Economist magazine this week, quote, there will most likely be no deep and beautiful breakthrough, and each day that passes gives the Russians an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
The counteroffensive against Russia is stalled. Zelensky warned that Russia will have, quote, superiority in weapons, equipment, missiles, and ammunition for a considerable time. This is completely against what we've been told until about a couple of months ago, when Washington Post and others slowly began to change the narrative. Remember, for 2 fucking years, it was nonstop. Any day now, Russia's going to run out of everything. And now it's like they have an unlimited supply. We can't keep up with it. So it even says somewhere down there, oh, I forgot what the quote was. Carry on down. Oh, yeah. After Zelensky, The Economist goes on to interview... this is CNN's own doing. They have people in Kiev and elsewhere in Ukraine interviewing locals. You know, the Vox Populi. They've started to actually ask people on the streets what they think, because they didn't really do that until now. They just said whatever they want the Kiev government to say. And, you know, they're all like... Look at this one here. It's the last paragraph you can see visible there. I believe in Ukraine's victory, says someone in Kiev. But we have to take into account the objective reality. Well, what an extraordinary notion.
I believe I can fly.
Take into account the objective reality. Yes, indeed. So this is why like the mainstream media, this is why they are lying when they're in pre-war and hot war mode, because they know better. And you know that they know better, because when the thing is actually coming to an end, they start to speak of objective reality and the military facts on the ground, suggesting that you're kind of left, I suppose, the implication they just figure that out, and yet they betray their own pretense at that. They knew all along, and now they don't mind reporting the truth factually, because they are bringing this thing to a close. Okay, so the third item in mainstream reporting last week came from Time. I'm not even sure, this might be behind a paywall, Scotty, but the Time magazine. So Time, you remember who was Time Person of the Year last year? Zelensky. Of course he was. Well, a year later, I suppose it's a long one, but the kicker paragraph, if you do a word
Well, the
search,
title's a kicker. Nobody believes in our victory like I do. We go ahead and have victory all by yourself then.
well, that's pretty much it. That's obviously them quoting.
He doesn't look happy again. He never looks happy.
That was his September visit. What this Time report does...
See, there's what do you call him on the left there, Mitch McConnell. You see why he's smiling at Zelensky, and Zelensky's feeling very sad.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is the subtext behind that is that Mitch McConnell is very happy because he's looking at the guy who has allowed for the US to reindustrialize or revitalize its industrial base at the expense of him and his people. So that's why he's happy and he's sad. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what Time did was they followed Zelensky throughout his September visit to Congress and elsewhere in the United States, and then the notorious one in Canada, remember? Then they went home with him back to Kiev. And what the article has is it quotes anonymous advisor to Zelensky in Kiev, saying things like, well, I'll find the key paragraph. If you do a word search for despite the recent... there it is. Despite the recent setbacks on the battlefield, he, Zelensky, does not intend to give up fighting or to sue for any kind of peace. On the contrary, his belief in Ukraine's ultimate victory over Russia has hardened into a form that worries some of his advisors. It is immovable, verging on the messianic. Here's a quote from the anonymous advisor. Quote, he deludes himself.
It's not him.
We're out of options. We're not winning, but try telling him that.
That's because it's hard to tell anybody high on cocaine that things are bad. You know what I mean? They're really, when they're snorting a lot of cocaine, they're really convinced of.
Well, you know
what's awesome.
What's really insidious about this is that we know Zelensky knew better when he was thinking seriously about a deal with Russia in April 2022. But
that was nixed by Johnson.
These shitheads came in and told him, "Don't you dare."
Yeah, but since then,
and now they're saying, "Oh, everyone else around Zelensky knows that, but try telling him that he's deluded." So this third piece conclusively shows you they're pushing him under the bus.
Yeah, well, of course,
pushing him under the.
But he's
the
a fall
Russian
guy.
train.
He's an ultimate. He's the ultimate patsy in that respect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like Zelensky's running around. Again, maybe sustaining himself with the regular line of coke, going like, "No, we're too far in. We're not turning back. We're winning. We're going to win. We're going to win bigly eventually. We just got to keep going." And the rest of the Americans and the Europeans are like, "Dude, did you really not understand
why we just did that?
This whole thing from the get-go? Really? I mean, come on. Really? We thought that you were in on the joke at the beginning. We thought you were just going along for the same reasons we were, which was to, get rid of our old weapon stocks, a major concern, and revitalise our industrial base, and push back against, give Russia a problem. It's all geopolitical. It's not about Ukraine. It's not about you. Like, it's not Ukraine win. It's not about getting a medal. Like, it's not like saying I won. Ukraine came first in the Russia war competition. Like, you don't get to stand on the podium and get a medal. You know what I mean? And give a speech. It's not what. Do you really live? What world do you live in, Zelensky? Come on, really? You're shocking us here. We thought we thought you were one of us.
Zelensky is,
and he just on a sad face.
He's come up with an idea of how to salvage the situation. He's proposed that he fly out to Israel.
Yeah. Well, there's one other piece. I just throw it in there for reference. This was in the news on this topic again this week. This is what amazes me about this. These two pranksters, Vovan and Lexus, have done this probably a dozen times or more at this point over the past few years.
Who have they not pranked?
And so they're going around pranking. Just wait a few months, prank some other high-level European politician, prime minister, president, whatever, and get them to say stuff that they wouldn't say publicly. And I'm amazed that she doesn't know this, or that her people. I mean, it's an example of delusion or just being too busy with other stuff. But it's a serious leak. You know what I mean? In terms of security, this is a serious security leak where you get somebody in a position of power in a Western country to say something that they would never say publicly. And these two guys, Russian guys, have done this repeatedly. So there's more than enough evidence for every politician in Europe to realise, listen, double, triple, whatever, check whoever the call is from. But she turns around and she says basically that there's a lot of fatigue. You have to say the truth from all the sides. We're not really into it anymore. And this was September. So basically she's saying, and she's speaking on behalf of all sides on the anti-Russian side or the pro-Ukraine side in this conflict, that we're all super fatigued.
She's repeating what she hears at NATO meetings in Brussels.
Exactly. They're all having their little meetings together and discussing it. So but they're all in it together. They all agree in a certain sense. Like, she agrees. Italy probably hasn't provided much in the way of funding or whatever relatively to Ukraine, but they're done as well. But just the thing about it is, it's obviously not over. The band's going to make it. Ukraine's going to win. No. The thing about it is that conflict is ongoing.
Yeah, it's not really
what's happening. The lines are pretty much stable. Ukraine at this point, and the main thing, and this is the main thing that people don't understand a lot of people don't understand throughout the whole conflict. They were looking at the map of Ukraine over the past couple of years and how much much territory Russia had taken. Like, look at that, it's so little. Russia they lost a bunch and all this kind of stuff, and they failed to understand a very simple and basic truth about any war, is that the war between two parties isn't about how much territory you gain in the process of the war. A war is fundamentally about two armies confronting each other, and the one who wins, regardless of what territory is taken or given back or whatever, the one who wins is the one who destroys the other army, to the point that the other army has no more men left. to actually fight the war. If you don't have any soldiers, you can't fight a war. It doesn't matter how many weapons, how many HIMARS America still has to give, or Leopard tanks, or whatever, Israeli tanks even.
Challenger tanks.
It doesn't matter, because if you get nobody to drive them, you're not having any more war. You've lost. So the whole map and the way it might have changed and how relatively little land Russia actually took has always been irrelevant. It's about, all you had to do was keep your eye on the attrition numbers of the figures of the reliable figures of dead Ukrainian soldiers versus dead Russian soldiers. And that's, at this point, it's somewhere between, it has been from the very beginning, roughly, variably, but somewhere between 8 to 10 to 1. So, and there was a report out this week that the BBC and a few others had, according to them, reliably assessed from whatever records they could get their hands on, that I think it's 40,000, somewhere in the 40,000s of killed Russian soldiers over the past 2 years. So,
does that include Wagner? It may not.
Most of them, actually, a majority of them, not a majority, but the biggest percentage of them, something like a third or more, were actually convicts, ex-convicts, which included Wagner. So yeah, it does include Wagner and mainly Wagner, actually. But the biggest portion was Wagner, and then just regular troops. But the point is that you multiply by 10 for Ukrainians. So you're talking about somewhere up to, in the region of 400 to 500,000 dead Ukrainians. That, and we know from the very beginning that Ukraine was able to muster or had mustered 600,000 soldiers who were capable, who had trained, proper training, etc. The vast majority, 80-90% of those are now dead. So that's why they're talking about peace or some kind of stalemate or some kind of settlement. And what the Ukrainians have to do at this point, and will do at this point, there'll be no more Ukrainian offensive attacks. They'll go. What their plan now basically is to go back to just defense only, to try and keep it going, let it carry on, but no more great, massive, awesome, best ever Russian or Ukrainian offensives.
Zelensky said beautiful breakthrough or something.
Yeah, there'll be no beautiful breakthroughs. There's not going to be any Ukrainian attacks. There's going to be basically just defense and trying to prevent Russia from taking any more land.
Well, that's the question. What does Russia do next?
Well, Russia is in a position where there's no, despite this talk in the West of what are we going to have to get Zelensky to agree to give up in order to sue for peace, and how much land will we have to allow Russia to take? 20%, the territories, the 4 territories, maybe that's it. But from the part of Zelensky and a lot of people at least a certain amount of people in Ukraine, the Ukrainian government, they're like, no way, never. Ban's going to make it. It's not over. We're going to keep going. Others are a bit more realistic. The Russians, obviously, is the other side of the equation, and the Russians are like, bah, there's no mention from the Russians at all about any kind of ceasefire, any kind of surrender, any kind of coming to terms. The Russians basically aren't done, and that's understandable, because the Russians, it'd be a very bad idea for the Russians. Certainly, it's not in their. It has never been in their plan that at this point they would give up. We've got these. Not even all the full territory of those 4 regions. Only partial, some of them, and
so they're going to move somewhat, at least.
No, well, Russia will continue to attack the Ukrainian military because the Russia's not going to settle now for this, and then there's some peace, because the vast majority of Ukraine, which would remain in Ukrainian hands in that scenario, would still be allowed to join NATO and join the EU and then rebuild, and in 10 years you'll be back at square one.
Yeah.
In 10 years you're back to March 2022. Do you think Russia wants that? I mean, that obviously wouldn't be a good idea, and I don't think the Russians are planning that at all. There's no way. Ukraine has to be totally neutralized, and by neutralized I mean made into a neutral country at the very least, and take its
regime change
and take its normal position
at the very least.
Yeah. So that's how that happens. Don't know, but the background or the bigger picture to all of this, and I think which is on the Russians' mind as well, is that they don't have to get to a position where they find some way to take over all of Ukraine, or have a regime change in Ukraine, or turn the clock back 10 years or 20 years, whatever, and make Ukraine an ally of Russia again, by force. That the only reason Ukraine, this Ukraine conflict actually occurred, and why Ukraine effectively attacked Russia or provoked Russia into defending the people of Donbass, was because, as we just mentioned, American geopolitical interests and Western and by association Western European geopolitical interests, but mainly American. So I think on the Russians' mind is, and Putin has said this explicitly, that the West is going down the tubes basically. America is teetering and it doesn't have long left basically. So
there's no need for Russia
to do anything except hold the line, stay, just do whatever it needs to do, because if and when some kind of economic crisis, which the Russians have predicted, major global upset or change, at least in the power structures in the world, if that happens, that by definition will implies some serious pain for America economically and in its global standing,
and therefore the places most dependent on it. Kiev
has no more supporters.
Pays salaries and pensions because of the US money supply, and then when that stopped, at that point Kiev is basically bowl in hand. Going to Moscow anyway, and they willingly come over. There's no need to fight them to that.
There'll be no money in America for them, no money in Europe for them. Nobody looking to invest, nobody with the resources to invest. They'll be concerned with their own economies, and Russia will be there and say, "Listen, at that point, Russia will negotiate terms, and it won't be based on necessarily military equation. It'll be based on the economic equation, and that's much more pressing, obviously."
Right. The one other outcome of this is mentioned in passing in the Financial Times. It's behind a paywall, so I can't show it. There's the one major outcome of this war. The headline is the EU's plan to regain its competitive advantage. The Financial Times last week. It says in there that the EU economy in dollar terms is 65% the size of the US economy. That's down from 91%, almost parity in 2013, 10 years ago.
All by design.
Per capita, US gross domestic product is more than twice the size of the EU's, and the gap is increasing. That's the result. That's the substantial economic result of Euro deindustrialization, thanks to the Ukraine war.
Yeah. No, it was by accident. No, it was American capitalism. No, it was
American ingenuity. Yeah,
ingenuity.
Indeed. It was if you include blowing up Nord Stream as part of American ingenuity, then okay,
it depends how you define it.
You're right.
It was all those entrepreneurs, because as Bush said, the Europeans and especially the French don't have a word for entrepreneur. So it's a business mind that.
Did he really say that?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. We have to find that.
Yeah, but that's by design. That's the hegemon. Taking its quote unquote fair share of the pie, right, at the expense of its vassals, and the vassals just go, "Yes, thank you. Okay, that's fine. You can do that. You want the other shirt off my back? Okay, you can have that too."
Can we stop worrying about nuclear apocalypse now? Because everyone was got their knickers in a twist. So if the Ukraine war is ending, does that mean peace on earth and goodwill to all men? No more Armageddon. Except it's all blown up in the Middle East. Now,
it's funny how they segue. You know how they segue?
We knew.
Has anybody noticed the segue? Have you noticed the segue, Neil?
Definitely.
Did you notice the segue from COVID? Do you notice how COVID was all the rage, and then boom, it just started to peter out, and then something else came along by accident.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just natural waves. Nobody knows about it, right? Nobody plans that, right?
No, they do.
Nah, come on.
They do.
It's just natural.
What I was going to say was...
It's exciting times. It just happened all that.
Do you remember it looked like a FUBAR, Afghanistan, late 2021? But now we know they were preparing for Ukraine.
No, that was just accidental as well.
Now they're turning down Ukraine, and they've got 4 aircraft carrier groups.
Neil, you're such a conspiracy theorist. Just coincidence. Fuck me. You're just seeing coincidences everywhere. Stop seeing conspiracies everywhere. Just call them coincidences, and no one will laugh at you.
Okay. Even though I have this hat on.
They'll laugh at you for that, but... Look.
Okay, the coincidence.
It's coincidence theory. Give me your coincidence theory. The strange, unusual, highly improbable coincidences that have happened over the past years are just very interesting, but for their improbability and for the way in which they seem to all move in a kind of downward direction for the planet and the population as a whole. Again, it's... I don't know.
It's starting to look like even the American establishment is not that so full of hubris that it really believes it can fight two wars at once.
No.
That's why Ukraine is wound down while they focus on the Middle
There's
East.
a big coincidence coming up soon, right? Well, obviously it was a coincidence that it just so happened that the Americans had decided to divest from Ukraine at a time when Israel decided to have a go at Gaza.
Well, and another coincidence, because coincidentally Hamas surprised them.
Because coincidentally,
Hamas,
the Israeli military were, for that day on evening of October 7th, just all fell asleep at once. Not only the Israeli military personnel, but all of their cameras, all of their surveillance equipment. It all just went to sleep. That's just a coincidence as well, okay? So as a result of that coincidence, Hamas coincidentally was able to escape from Gaza and go and take over a bunch of military bases and go into different kibbutzim near Gaza. And it is also just a coincidence that the people that so many Israelis were killed, because that then allowed Israel to do what it's done in terms of its massive, disproportionate, let's say, or massive bombing campaign of Gaza, provoking potential wider war in the Middle East. That's a coincidence as well. It's also a coincidence that the people in the kibbutzim said that the Hamas personnel and other Palestinian militants who went into the kibbutzim and stuff treated them very well. And it's just a coincidence that America or the Israelis have this, the IDF have this directive called the Hannibal Directive, which is in the case where there are hostages taken by your enemy, you just kill everybody. Mm-hmm. So Hamas killed those 1,400 Israelis, if that's the true number. And it's only a coincidence that someone, like actual hostages who were there on the ground, said that it was very likely that a lot of the Israelis were killed by. It's kind of a contradiction more than a coincidence. But anyway, it's all very coincidental. And it's also a coincidence that a potential wider war in the Middle East would upset the global economy in a kind of proactive way.
Well, do you think that's what's ultimately motivating the Americans here?
Well, I'll tell you, here's another coincidence.
Because they've sent 4 aircraft carrier groups. Supposedly it's to cover Israel while it does what it's doing.
Well, you know where one's transiting right now, or probably has gone through it.
The Suez
the
Canal.
Eisenhower's is through the Suez Canal. Where's that
and
going?
the Iranians have a drone over.
Where's that going?
Footage of it. That's going to somewhere near Iran.
Maybe. Or it might just hang out in the Red Sea. Probably not, but it's probably going on around Saudi and into the
Strait of
into the
Hormuz.
Persian Gulf. Yeah. I mean, I would assume that's why is it going that direction? I don't see anywhere strategically that important. Maybe to protect Saudi Arabia or something. But they've already put 1 or 2.
There are 2 off Lebanon.
2
Israel.
off on the Eastern Mediterranean, looking at basically the whole situation in Israel and Palestine right now. And then there's a third that's taken off down the Suez Canal. Where's it going? I don't know. It's going obviously going to protect somebody else. It's going to look at somebody else, right? To leer at some other country or protect some other country. It can only be Saudi Arabia or maybe Yemen. Maybe they'll set off Yemen. But that's anyway. It's in and around the Persian Gulf, Iran, etc.
Okay, so look, for a month, they've almost got tired of it because they're on, tenterhooks, thinking what's going to happen next. On Friday, we had the speech long-awaited speech and much hyped by Nasrallah, leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon, which the sum of it is, he said, we're not going to do anything precipitous. We're already at war since October 8th because we're drawing Israeli fire. He claims about a third of Israel's military capacity is directed north. And that seems to hold out. There are exchanges over the border. Okay. But we're not going the tragedy of it is he either can't or won't or whatever. They're not stepping. No one is stepping in. If Hezbollah are not stepping in to stop what's going on in Gaza, no one else is. So how do you go from there to something else? And specifically, is that what somebody wants?
Well, I mean,
because
yes, the scenario
is there a halfway house between obliterating Gaza and everyone agreeing not to go mad on it, and actual mad. What is an escalation?
No. No, I mean, it's a strange. The facts on the ground right now are that the Israelis will probably, over the next starting now and over the next while, will tone down their bombing. Whatever that's relative for the Israelis, obviously, but they'll tone down.
I suspect they'll stop when the death toll hits 14,000.
Why? 10 times.
Just a 10.
Well, there's the 10,000 symbolic marker
numbers,
as well.
They like numbers, like
yeah. But so they'll kind of tone it down because they've started their quote unquote ground offensive, which isn't really a ground offensive. It's it is a ground offensive. They're moving in, and their whole thing, the whole plan. The idea from the get-go was to get into Gaza. That's why they bombed the crap out of the place and were hitting, just destroying a lot of buildings and leveling a lot of buildings because they wanted to clear a way basically for the ground offensive, and the objective of the ground offensive is to destroy the Hamas tunnel network, right? Mm-hmm. There's a tunnel network all along Gaza, not just in the north, but they've more or less annexed about the top third, let's say, of Gaza. From the Wadi Gaza River running through over to the sea. From there up, not all Palestinians actually have moved south, obviously, but some of them have. And they're fighting, and then in the rubble that Israel has created in that northern third of Gaza, Hamas and the PLO and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and stuff are having these essentially urban, hit and run battles with the IDF. That's going to go on for quite a while.
Do you think so? I mean, the videos.
That's the plan. It'll go on for quite a while.
Okay.
It's going to take a while. I mean, because
Netanyahu said last week this is going to take a long time.
Yeah, months, whatever. That's what he said. So it's going to take quite a while, and they're in no rush to do it. They'll just carry on and keep bombing up here and there, bombing here and there, whatever. There's the issue of the Palestinian humanitarian crisis that they've created for the rest of the people in Gaza. That has to be dealt with, and they have to either let people out or let supplies in or whatever. That's a separate issue.
I heard there's 600 and some thousand refugees, i.e.,
from the north.
They've had to move out from the north, so they were already piling up.
Yeah.
Well,
that's most.
That's what they said.
Most of the people in that area of one third that of northern Gaza that the Israelis have. The IDF have annexed in a certain sense, not annexed, but they've been taken over and they're fighting battles ongoing. But their plan is to, like I said, to destroy the tunnels. So what happens? What's the game plan here? What looking towards the future? What's going to happen? Well, we're going to destroy the Hamas tunnels and thereby destroy Hamas in the same process. So Hamas will no longer exist. Okay, once you've achieved that objective, so you leave. Right, after these months, whatever, you've destroyed all the tunnel networks, you're satisfied they've destroyed most of Hamas to the point that it's no longer really an effective force anymore. And you leave. Right, you're not going to... You haven't expelled the Palestinians, just crammed them all into the bottom of Gaza, right?
Or
nobody's taking them.
You annex, you remain indefinitely in the northern half.
Well, possibly, but if it doesn't look like anybody is going to take the Palestinians in, like Egypt or Jordan or anyone, they're not going out of that strip of Gaza, then even the Israelis have to have a view, have an eye on the optics and the
Do they?
They're quite resilient in terms of resisting it and fighting back against it. But if they were to create a situation where hundreds of thousands of people starve to death, I don't think they would go that far simply because of the optics, right? So they would have to allow some normalization, and it's not tenable to have twice the population in half the space of Gaza. I don't think they would keep all of Gaza. And anyway, they've destroyed maybe a third of the buildings in the northern part of Gaza. So let them back in. Israelis leave, and now you've got Gaza partly ruined with no Hamas. But most of the Palestinian population, most of the 2 million people, is still there. So, but that just is a scenario, same as the scenario I posited, I suggested is in terms of the thinking of the Russians vis-a-vis Ukraine. That would just leave that in 10 years. You just put it off 10 years.
Those kids will grow up.
Well,
and be fighters.
You just killed 10,000 people. So you basically, created another generation of anti-Israeli Palestinian fighters, basically. So it's not a solution. The point is, it's not a solution. What they're doing right now is not a solution. It's a short-term win, but it's not a solution to the problem, and they're just putting it off. Maybe they just want to get themselves 10 years of breathing space or something from Palestinians, where they have to rebuild and get themselves together, and they Israelis get 10 years of no rocket fire. But I don't think I think they've gone all in enough in this episode that they want a fuller solution, or somebody wants a more complete solution to the problem. And by the problem, I mean, you have to understand the problem for Israel isn't just Hamas. It's very clear that the problem is the wider network, as they see it.
It's the quote sea of Muslims all around them.
Right. And as they claim, or they believe, Iran being the leader and the
ringleader,
the ringleader of these whole problems. So a broader solution to that whole problem, obviously by definition, implies that Iran has to be dealt with, and other, allied pro-Palestinian states like Syria, Assad, Yemen. They all have to be told what's up, basically.
Yeah.
They all have to be taught a very harsh lesson, and it has to be permanent. They have to remake the Middle East, right, in a way that is safe for Israel,
and
permanently, or very long time safe for Israel.
So they think they can do a controlled Armageddon and remake the Middle East again in their favorite image, and
they're willing to
not lose and not set off
right
Armageddon.
Yeah,
mad
of
some kind.
They think that, and they're testing it. They're going step by step and seeing where it goes.
And the Americans are in position for that next step.
The Americans are there because there's a convergence of interests there. So that's the Israeli interest, to make the Middle East safe for Israel. Now, America obviously wants to make the Middle East safe for Israel as well, for its own personal interests. Because Israel has always been like you use the phrase, America's aircraft carrier.
Unsinkable aircraft.
Unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East. That's what it always has been. So America, the convergence of interest here is that America sees the Israeli interests of dealing with these Arabs, these Iranians and Iranian-aligned groups in the Middle East. That's Israel wants to get rid of them, destroy them, make the Middle East safe for Israel. And America sees, well, if we were to to get on board with that and upend the Middle East, create some kind of a major conflict in the Middle East, it would have kind of global repercussions, because the Middle East, as everybody knows, is
the energy spigot of the world.
Right. China is
Dependent
a major American geopolitical foe that America is, eager to deal with in one way or another as well. And
Nikki Haley tweeted today, America's number one enemy is communist China.
Communist China.
Make it nice and simple for everyone.
So, and they can't deal with China. Way too many people, too big. They can't deal with it militarily. So, best way is economically. China's Achilles heel is economics, and it's like you said, its dependence on its economy and its economy's dependence on Middle Eastern oil. So, if you can mess up the Middle East big time and shut off for quite a long time, cause serious problems with the supply of energy from the Middle East, you're going to deal a significant blow to China's economic growth and movement. And the other part of that context is China and along with Russia, their One Belt, One Road, China's One Belt, One Road initiative, which is basically the idea of a multipolar world, i.e. not the world we have today and have had for 100 years or more, where the West or America has been the global hegemon and has dictated terms and taken the biggest slice of the pie, but rather a more equitable sharing of the resources of the world, and focusing the center of the world would be the Eurasian continent, from kind of Vladivostok or Beijing or whatever over to Western Europe. Like that chunk of Eurasia has 80% of the world's resources, 80% of the world's population. That should be the center of the world, and that's where the economic power in the world should be. That's China's vision. And it's borne out by the
China and
geography and population and energy resources.
Objective reality.
So America doesn't like that, doesn't want to be unseated as the hegemon. So that's why China primarily is its enemy, and the only way it can deal with China is economically, and the best way it can deal with China economically is to throttle its energy supply, and a big part of China's energy supply comes from the Middle East. So you you could throw the Chinese economy into recession, and that obviously all the knock-on effects from that. And you would, in a certain sense, but obviously there's a lot of pitfalls in that, where you might have global economic crisis, countries falling off the cliff all over the place. But as America sees it, if they sit back and allow for this Chinese-Russian agenda of a multipolar world, and pushing along with BRICS and all that kind of stuff, and basically a multipolar world where there's, like I just said, there's a more equitable sharing of the world's power and resources, and towards the places where most of the power and resources are, that spells doom for America.
It doesn't really, but yeah, it spells doom for the way they've always, the way they've gotten used to doing business.
It kind of does, but it's
the highwaymen approach,
it's that
the
plus,
Wild West approach.
Yeah, they don't like it because they want to remain top dog, but it does spell doom for the American economy, because if a multipolar world were to emerge, then the dollar would no longer be the world reserve currency.
And they'd all come flooding back.
American economy contracts massively, and you have really the economic destruction of America. So it's existential for America.
So we must economically destroy China before, quote, they, but actually it's just objective reality, destroys us.
Before objective reality intrudes on us. And there's an opportunity that's been dropped in our lap here with, again, a coincidence that it's an opportunity that's been dropped in our lap, where Israel has got all head up and started a fire in the Middle East with the Palestinians, and the Americans are going, hey, we can make some lemonade right here by expanding this. Because if they don't expand it, like I just said, where's it going to go? All the opposition, Hezbollah, Iran, they're all sitting back going, we're not doing nothing.
Cassandra in the chat says, but surely if the Chinese economy was threatened, China and Russia, their partner, would step in big time.
Step in where?
That's the thing, yeah.
No, but that's the thing.
Step in presumably to
stop
the war in the Middle East.
But that's the genius. They could try. And China has sent, it was doing, naval exercises with, who's it with there recently? Anyway, they were in the just off the Persian Gulf.
They docked a boat in the Gulf, in Kuwait. Right.
So they're engaged in some exercises there. So they're obviously in the region, and they're keeping an eye on it because they know they're not stupid. Obviously, if we can figure it out, we're not the smartest people in the world around to look at the Chinese.
Probably are the smartest people in the world. Asians, man.
No, we're not the Chinese smartest people in the world. So if we can figure it out, then the Chinese definitely have this figured out and see where it's going. And like who said that? Cassandra said, would the Chinese not step in if they saw that happening? But America's not doing it to China.
Right.
Remember, the genesis of this is like Hamas committed a 9/11 style terrorist. Sorry, I don't want to laugh at that, but just the phrase of it, the phraseology. 9/11 style terror attack.
Yeah, 9/11.
9/11. Okay, it was 9/11.
Times 1,000.
Times 1,000. Hamas carried out a 9/11 times 1,000 terror attack on Israelis, which justifiably then the Israelis respond to, stoking the ire of other Arab countries in the region, which then in one way or another, depending on how things go and who might throw in a bomb into the middle, some hidden hand might throw something in there that might maybe kicks it off, but let's say it kicks off into a much bigger, broader Middle Eastern conflict, and that upends shipping and global energy supplies towards China and Europe and everywhere. But who cares? They're collateral damage, right? China's the main target. So in that situation, China looks at it and says, yeah, those sneaky Americans, you know what I mean? We can see what they did there. I can see what you did there,
Yeah.
But what are they going to say? Are they going to lay all that out and say, therefore, we're justified in attacking America? I mean, there's a long chain of events, let's say, or at least several, coincidences along the way that just so happen to result in China getting screwed over economically from an energy supply perspective. That's how these people roll. They're pretty sneaky, pretty smart, sneaky and smart.
Do you think that includes the Americans being willing to sacrifice Israel in this? If that's what it takes to set the Middle East aflame, to hurt China, we don't care about Israel going forward. It can burn like the rest of it.
Because
or really, will it be all in to protect Israel from the fires they set off around it?
No, I mean they'll try to, but I mean part of igniting a major conflict in the Middle East that upends global energy supplies is attacking countries that are attacking Israel. That's your justification, right? Or that are attacking you because you've got aircraft carriers off the coast and stuff. Maybe they attack you or try to attack you. But anyway, they attack you and or Israel or both, whatever. That's the justification, you know?
Yeah. It's just that if anything kicks off, Hezbollah's rockets aren't able to go anywhere else but Israel. That's what they're going to hit.
No, but in answer to your question, yes, absolutely, Israel will be sacrificed. But to some extent. Because if the plan is to create a global energy crisis, basically, like a pretty serious global economic crisis that takes down, at least in part, China, you know, and deals blows to everybody indiscriminately, kind of like Israel's bombs in Palestine, to indiscriminately get everyone, but as long as you get the key players. And out of the dust, you, kind of like in the Second World War, America, way over there in the Atlantic, far from the fray, can emerge as the dust settles and reassert yourself.
With another Marshall Plan.
And it'll all be very different. And it'll be a new Middle East. Of course, they might get the Jews back into Jerusalem or something like that after a while or whatever, and create a new Israel, call it Nova Jerusalem or Nova
Judah.
Nova Judah, Nova whatever. And, and just, see what happens. It's creative destruction, right? You can't create anything without destroying it all first, right? I think. Is that the idea? Anyway, I think that's the idea. And that's the best way. Of course, it generally doesn't go to plan, but and they underestimate their enemies in that scenario.
Another idea for a new name: Yahwehstan.
Yahwehstan.
Not bad.
New Zion, Nova Zion. Anyway.
Okay, that's pretty big in scope. Damn, that picture. But
what's the
right
point?
now, I mean, there's a report that Israel has lost 61 tanks so far. That's unverified, but there's some pretty slick footage. Hamas is impressive in that I don't remember the Russians ever doing this. They're getting the videos back from their guys. They're obviously wearing GoPro. They're getting them edited cleverly. Do you see that? The quick zoom in to show that they've hit the target? And then the little arrows to tell you where they are, because you can't see. It's all grainy and grey, but they say it's right here. And then they get it uploaded online. It goes viral. That's better than Russian PR in Ukraine.
Yeah,
anyway, there's a lot of footage. Like
it's those tunnels. I mean, Israel's right that the tunnels are a problem. Like,
right.
I mean, you imagine it like in any. I mean, the Russians didn't have that situation in Ukraine. There was no town in Ukraine.
Oh well, there was some serious bunker building. That's why they're still stuck right outside Donetsk City.
Bunkers. But there was no situation where the Russians. The advantage
the Russians never moved in anywhere and were.
The Ukrainians never moved in anywhere onto Russian territory, where the Russians had established a massive network of tunnels. Well, they could pop up here, there, everywhere, fire an RPG, and then disappear again. I mean, that's a nightmare. In any conflict, the advantage is to the person who holds the ground and is defending it. You know what I mean? From the attacker. Because the attacker's coming into new territory, they don't know what's going on. People have been there and have set up all their defenses. They know exactly where they are, where to go, where to be and stuff, and how to defend. You know what I mean? The advantage is always to the defender in that scenario, and even more so when you've got a network of tunnels. So it's not surprising, and it's also not surprising because these really have no experience of conflict. The average Israeli soldier, again, a tank, all he does is drive around the parking lot now and again and shoot at clay pigeons or something. They have no experience of actual warfare. The generation that are in the ADF now have no experience of
Nevertheless, they are going to hammer Hamas, Al-Qassam brigades, whatever it's called. There's no victory here for Palestinians in Gaza.
Well, there's never been.
It's a resilience, it's resistance, it's defensive, but the odds are definitely against them, even if they, score PR victories, which will mainly have the effect of shaking morale inside Israel itself. Not to the point there of most people calling for peace, mind you.
No. Do you want to? I know you don't like Jordan Peterson anymore. If you ever did.
What? No, I represent Israel. Remember, I love Jordan.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, you do like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro. He was on. He blocked me on Twitter, and a bunch of other people that I know he blocked on Twitter for saying boo to him, right? Because he's spookable. He's a bit scary. He's scary. I mean, he's sensitive. Anyway, so he's been blocking a lot of people who say anything to him about something. One tweet in particular, a few weeks ago, which was "Give him hell." He tweeted to Netanyahu when Israel started its bombing of Gaza, "Give him hell." So he lost a lot of Muslim people and a lot of ordinary people in Western countries as well who thought he was better than that, whatever. But he's a victim of his own kind of overinflated
Intellect.
sense of his intellect or intellect, yeah. That is only works in certain situations apparently, because when it becomes emotional, there's emotional considerations or emotional understanding, or whatever you want to call it, or another way of looking at it rather than just pure intellect. He misses out. Anyway, so he was on Piers Morgan after the dust had settled and he'd recovered. He
makes Piers Morgan sound reasonable.
Yeah, which is weird, you know. Jesus. So there's a few excerpts I'd just like to kind of from that interview. I'd like to just let you have a listen to, and because it's illustrative. Because the thing is, Jordan Peterson he just popped out of nowhere really with the woke, enforced speech and transgender stuff. 2016, he popped out of nowhere. And he had some good advice for young men and that kind of stuff. Pick up your damn burden, and we'll get back to that in a minute. Pick up your damn burden. Show some, just stop being a victim. Basically, he's one of these people. Everybody I know who talks about any of this are all on the kind of side that I was on. Although the sides have been shifting a lot over the past 10 or 15 years. I don't know which side I'm on anymore. But on the side that I would have been on over the past 5 or 6 years, everybody I know who's on that side have all. Their main thing has always been, the thing they gravitated to was the idea of people in a victimhood mentality. Mm-hmm. And how when you're in a victimhood mentality, you get angry at anybody who's better than you and you want to take them down. And that can be...
And you become fixated on identity politics.
Right. Identity politics. We're all victims together. And that can be at the level of just local people or groups that you don't like to an entire society-wide thing. That's the whole... the radical lefty Marxist want to take down the patriarchal Western social system because it's all evil, ruin it all. And so they've all been like, that's terrible, these people. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a good idea. Don't wreck things, But every one of those people, and it's almost literally every single one of them happens to be in this current conflict pro-Israel, which is totally weird. Anyway. But I think I know why. Anyway, just play that and I'll tell you when to stop.
I think Iran is desperate because of the tenuous hold on power that the mullahs now have in Iran, given their own citizens' rebellion. I think they see the Abraham Accords, which were the most significant step forward towards peace in the Middle East for like 75 years. They see the Abraham Accords as an existential threat. This is a last-ditch attempt by the Iranian mullahs to use the Islam against Jews story to prop up their own dismal reign.
Okay.
And so,
what citizens' rebellion in Iran? I missed that. When did that happen?
Well, it was in the Western media about protests in Iran.
When? Oh, yeah. Okay, a couple of years ago, yeah. There were protests because some girl was
allegedly
killed by the morality police.
But in
fact,
she wasn't.
She had fainted, and there was CCTV footage showing that she fainted.
Yeah.
Or collapse of a stroke, maybe vaccine or something.
Right. So the reason we're talking about John Peterson here is because, like I said, he came out in 2016. He has no history of watching the world or understanding geopolitics or anything like that. He started off as obviously spent most of his years as a psychologist dealing with people's personal problems. And then he pops up with this, compelled speech and woke left mob and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought it was interesting that he comes new to it, and already his take is interesting. You know what I mean? It seems to be very much aligned with the American perspective, basically the dominant Western narrative about Israel and Palestine. It seems to be pretty much, but he tries to be reasoned about it. He tries to understand it, and it's just interesting how even when someone like him tries to understand what's actually going on, he still gets it totally wrong. You know what I mean? Because he doesn't understand the depth of the deception. He doesn't understand the history, most importantly. Anyway, so he thinks that Iran is desperate because it's quote unquote tenuous hold on power and citizens' rebellions, blah blah blah. So the Iranian regime is teetering, supposedly, and that these Abraham Accords, what we mentioned last week, were the most significant step towards peace in the Middle East for 75 years, and the Iranians hate that because they hate peace in the Middle East because, well, they see it as an existential threat, because the Abraham Accords would have made peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and that would have, and other Arab countries, and then sidelined Iran. And Iran would no longer have influence because the Abraham Accords. And as we showed last week in Netanyahu, 3 weeks before the October 7th, at the UN, showing this pathway to peace via the Abraham Accords, which was primarily, it was very similar to China's One Belt, One Road, except a challenge to China's One Belt, One Road, effectively, an alternative to it. So anyway, that's his first hot take. It ignores the fact that there've been polls, like fairly objective polls, showing that a majority of Iranians approve of their government. That doesn't matter, Jordan Peterson apparently, and also that the Iranian economy is set to. There's good prospects for the Iranian economy. It's set to grow 2% or 2.3%, whatever. So the whole idea that Iran is either socially or politically or economically in some kind of like danger zone and they're about to collapse is just false. So, and he doesn't realize that, Anyway, I think he follows on here with something similar. Go ahead.
And so they rattled the chain of their Hamas puppets and said,
Iran.
Provoke, and they did, and their hope is that the Israeli response will be so overwhelming that the Arab world turns against them, and maybe even the people who might be inclined to be swayed by a victim narrative in the West, and that the Abraham Accords will fall apart, and that'll be the end of that. And that could happen, and I'm hoping it won't, because
Okay.
I think the Abraham Accords were, and it's irritating to me.
Stop there. It's irritating to me. Yeah, he's kind of more irritating to me than anything else right now. So apparently Iran rattled the chain of their Hamas puppets and said, provoke. And Hamas provoked.
Yes, sir.
And their hope, because there's no agency on the part of Hamas, the Palestinian people. In fact, as you'll see later, he goes on, we'll talk about that in a minute anyway. He goes on about the Palestinians and Hamas. He says, and the Iranian hope is that the Israeli response will be so overwhelming that the Arab world turns against them, Israel. Mm-hmm. So Jordan Peterson apparently can figure this out. I don't know, he's getting this from CNN or he's getting it from some of his billionaire friends that he's been hanging out with, or Ben Shapiro or whoever, or Netanyahu himself, who he talked with. So if all these people, Jordan Peterson knows this, so if this is the dominant narrative, then if they all know that the point here was for that it was a situation where Iran was provoking Hamas, or Iran was telling Hamas, rattling the chains, hey, slave, go get me some stuff. And Hamas said, yes, master, and went and did it, and did the provoking. And the whole point of Iran doing that was that the Israeli response would be so overwhelming that the whole Arab world would turn against them. Surely the Israelis would have went, hang on, that sounds like a trap, right?
Right.
We shouldn't do what we did. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't have the overwhelming response, right? Mm-hmm. Or is this just Jordan's personal theory? I'm pretty sure he has no personal theories about this because, like I said, he's a noob.
He doesn't realize it, but he's just made himself guilty of unconscious racism. Mm-hmm. Let me explain. Implied in his description there is this disappointment that the provocation of Israel worked, because he's unconsciously aware that Israel would react the way it did, massively disproportionately. And that's what he's sad about. Oh, if only Hamas had not listened to Iran and provoked Israel, Israel might have been a bit calmer, because I'm aware that Israel is a bit of a beast when it comes to abusing Palestinians. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's implied.
It's unconscious bias, unconscious racism. Yeah. He needs a mentor to tell him when he's being racist.
But that is patently false. That Iran controls Hamas.
Yeah.
It's just a horseshit. The only kind of links. Everyone knows this. I mean, this is easy to find out. It's on Wikipedia, for God's sake. Even there, Ziopedia, it's not controlled. They can't excise that. Hamas's formation is obviously originally Israeli in part.
Yeah.
In part,
Yeah.
right? It's the co-option.
Supported.
It's the co-option of the resistance. It's the way they always do it. The Americans and the Brits did it in Iraq. You co-opt the resistance and you turn it into something else, a sectarian war or whatever, a holy war.
But Jordan, it's too emotional to understand that.
It's so farcical that
That's too scary a
when
concept.
Syria kicked off, the Hamas leadership, the political leadership of Hamas, because it is in fact a political, it's like Sinn Féin, whereas the military wing is Al-Qassam brigades, whatever. Hamas leadership, there's two guys, I forget their names. The one with the beard, he's got one hell of a story. Anyway, at the time when Syria kicked off, they were in Syria. That's where they were basically political refugees. Just like in the old days, Arafat was in Lebanon at one point. Well, when Syria kicked off, they were there. And they left there for Qatar and changed their tune. They now announced that Hamas would be politically aligned with the Syrian rebels to overthrow the Assad government. The Assad government that's aligned with, if anyone has chains hanging out back to Tehran, it's the Assad government. So right there, Hamas was orthogonal to the directives and the wishes of Tehran. And that's since been paved over because, in part, the rest of the Arab world, the Arab League, welcomed Assad back into the fray. Syria as Bashar al-Assad's country is now back in the Arab League, and Saudi Arabia has paved all that over. But at the time, the alliances went directly the opposite way that Peterson's been playing.
The whole idea that Hamas is somehow, I mean, I know it was supported, it's a matter of record that it was supported by the Israelis as opposition to the PLO, the more moderate PLO, because the Israelis didn't want a moderate Palestinian authority, because they would be able to put themselves
They
forward.
wanted a religious one.
They wanted a hardline religious one.
Not a secular one.
Yes.
Not a nationalist one.
Right. And one that would
Hamas means Islamic fighters for jihad or something.
Right. The PLO would put forward too much of a coherent strategy, and they would have really been seen as the victims, and so they needed someone who was going to fight back, or a group that was going to fight back and to represent the Palestinians, so that they could periodically attack Israel. They know they'll attack Israel, so then Israel can continue to deal with this Palestinian problem in a military way, because the worst case for Israel is any push, and we've seen that over the years. Any push towards peace was always a horrible idea for. I mean, somebody murdered Yitzhak Rabin for signing
the Oslo Accord.
Yeah. So Israel never wanted peace, because peace means some kind of a Palestinian state, and Israel, the hardliners and the people who dominate Israeli politics and have done forever, never wanted any kind of peace with the Palestinians that would end in a Palestinian state, which was a just solution. They've never wanted it, and the best way to ensure that they never have a Palestinian state in Israel is to have the Palestinians represented by someone who they can present as a group that wants Israel wiped off the face of the earth, that itself doesn't want peace. So they're projecting, basically, they're projecting onto or creating a Palestinian authority that actually serves the Israeli agenda of never having to live with a Palestinian state, because they can justify never having any peace with the Palestinians because the Palestinians keep attacking us. But what if the Palestinians don't attack us anymore? What if they stop attacking us? What are we going to do? There's a serious danger there of some kind of a international pressure push towards a Palestinian state. So we have to stop that happening at all costs. We need an intractable enemy that never goes away and we can pitch as a terrorist. That's why we support Hamas. That doesn't mean that Hamas is, everything Hamas does is is directed by the Mossad or the Shin Bet or the
No.
IDF, the Israeli government.
It can be shaped, though.
It can be shaped, but the bottom line is, in the position that the Palestinians have been in for 80 years, armed conflict, given the attitude of the Israelis towards them, armed conflict is always going to be the outcome, because Israel leaves no other possibility.
Yeah.
So Hamas don't represent all the Palestinians. There's divided opinions in Palestine, but you know what? There's a uniformity in the vast majority of the Palestinian people, is that Israel is an aggressor state that stole our land and keeps us as second-class citizens in an apartheid state, and we are fully entitled to resist that by whatever means necessary under international law.
Yeah.
They all agree with that. And so what's it between that and what Hamas is doing? Anyway, there's something else Peterson waffled on about here.
I've always regarded Jews as the canary in the coal mine, and I think the reason that the Jews are the canary in the coal mine is because they're a successful minority. You know, and if a culture can tolerate a successful minority, it's pretty damn robust and it's not very resentful. And as soon as a culture starts to get resentful, the Jews make an easy target because they're a minority, and so that's an easy target to begin with. But then they're the minority that has the temerity to be successful. And that really brings the resentful out of the rat holes.
Right,
and I've
stop
seen a rise in anti.
I've seen rise in anti. So the problem here with
Define success.
The problem here with Peterson is that he's taking his 30 years of research as a psychiatrist, analysing individuals who are from snowflake generation, who easily become resentful about they're not making an impact in their job, and they get angry
And
they
getting
get
jealous
depressed,
of those who do succeed.
and they want to bring it all down, and they join the anti-patriarchy cause and all that kind of stuff.
And he's putting it through his Cain-Abel dichotomy.
He's projecting it onto a situation like Israel-Palestine, and he's basically saying that he's basically, you know, it's funny in a certain sense that he thinks he can take the individual dynamics from one person that he sees repeatedly.
SJWs on the campus back in Toronto.
Snowflakes.
And say, you Palestinians are behaving like these Toronto snowflakes.
Exactly.
Fuck off.
I know.
Really?
I mean, talking about ignorance, and he's, you know, it's like, he's always regarded Jews as the canary in the coal mine because they're a successful minority. So it's just, you know, he thinks this is like, they're kind of like the patriarchy, you know? They're seen as a patriarchy by Palestinians. So, yeah, exactly what you said. The Palestinians are social justice warrior snowflakes, and Israel is the Western patriarchy. And
hence the meme
yeah.
of Peterson talking to the Palestinian kid who's just lost his family. Clean up your room, bucko.
Right.
You know.
Pick up your damn burden. Don't be so resentful. What do you got to be resentful about? I know life is hard. You know, sure, that bomb that just obliterated all of your family and left you as an only child. Not only child, but an injured child. There's a new kind of phrase that
a new acronym.
An acronym
that doctors in the Gaza
injured
are using.
Is it injured child?
Oh, I can't remember.
I see no surviving family. ICNSF or something like that, which is injured child, no surviving family, and they're saying hundreds.
They had to invent the category. It didn't exist before this.
So to a child that just had, you know, maybe 20 or even 30 members of their extended family, like all of them, and this child is like 5 years old, and every last member of their immediate and extended family has just been killed by Israel. Jordan says to that child, you know, don't be so resentful.
Yeah.
Just pick up your damn burden, clean up your room, and go and get a job, and try and contribute to society.
And don't be so jealous of Israelis.
And don't be jealous of them.
Just because they were successful.
Just because they were successful at bombing you, you know, and they didn't suffer. You know,
it's
just
it's so ignorant,
isn't it?
It's so ignorant. He's such an ignoramus. It would just take a cursory scrolling of Twitter. Someone posted a side by side. There's footage from like the 1930s or something, or 20s, of Palestinian Jews. Interesting term, no? So these were Jews who actually lived in Palestine, Mandate Palestine, and before that, Ottoman Empire Palestine. They really did live there for generations, millennia maybe. Maybe it goes all the way back. They're called Palestinian Jews. They're still there. So they took the footage, and then there's a screen switch, and there's modern footage of the descendants of those Jews in Jerusalem, Palestine, they still live in kind of slums. It is quite ghetto-like. And you know how the Israeli state treats them? Just as much like the dirt they treat the Palestinian Arabs. There's no difference. They come in, they beat the shit up. Maybe they don't kill them to the same kind of numbers that they single out for Arabs and Muslims, but they are treated like dirt. Right there, you've blown up the religious thing on it. It is obviously religion is being used in this situation, but he's taking it as the actual core basis for this. That Iran is trying to provoke interreligious conflict. But Jordan, if you spent just half a day cursory scroll through Twitter or researching, whatever, you'd be aware that there were Palestinian Jews before, and that still to this day they're treated like shit by the Israeli state. Because invariably those Palestinian Jews have affinity for their other fellow people who were here before, and these bloody newcomers are coming in with their psychopathic mindset and their totally charged belief in birthright, in God's chosen people. In our right to this land. And it's like, it's as alien to the original Palestinian Jews as it is to the Palestinian Arabs.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now. And now we're playing it out the hard way, because the Iranians could win the propaganda war, and they've got, God only knows how many agents they have in the West, promoting the kind of social upheaval that we've seen on the streets in the last few weeks.
Oh, is there? So where's he getting this information? He's talking like, who is he talking like? He's talking like
Press TV is banned in Europe.
He's talking like a CNN anchor,
isn't he?
And God knows how many agents Iran has in the West, promoting the kind of social upheaval that we've seen in the streets in the last few weeks. So Iran is behind what, Black Lives Matter now, and what the transgender movement? Wasn't that the Russians? Wasn't it the Russians who had that plan? Some former KGB agent had moved to America, and he's on video saying that the whole plan was to spread cultural Marxism in America, to bring America down, to destroy America from the inside.
Right.
That was the whole Russian plan, and everybody took that and said, see, this is the outplaying of this social justice kind of business is exactly that. It's a KGB, long-term Soviet plan to destroy America from the inside. But apparently now it's Iran. It's anybody. It's anybody I want it to be.
Yeah.
Iran's doing it. Who's next? I don't know. The Houthis. It's those Houthis. They're spreading their agents in America.
He's not unique in this. We've seen Nigel Farage in the UK and others.
I know.
They're looking at the tens and up to 100,000 people or more gather in London, Washington, New York, major cities. They're seeing the sea of Palestinian flags and cafes and so on, and they're saying, oh my God.
Well, those people sleeping...
All those people are like migrants who've arrived, controlled by Iran.
How inane do you have to be? I mean, your head is up your ass. Not yours, theirs. Oh, God. They're ignorant. They're massively ignorant people. They do not live in the real world. They don't even live a normal life. They haven't lived normally over the past 20, 30 years of their lives in terms of paying attention to what actually happened. Every single time, over the past 20 years at least, if not, and longer, since the second Intifada at least, but before it, any time, and there's been like probably a dozen major times when Israel attacked Palestinians. On every single one of those occasions, there were large protests, pro-Palestinian protests, anti-Israel, anti-occupation protests in the streets of every single capital in Europe. Not so much in America, but a little bit in America, but mostly and they were all made up of indigenous white Europeans primarily. Of course, there were some immigrants or people from Palestine or from the Middle East who identified with the Palestinian cause, etc. But the vast majority of people were all indigenous white people. And they've done it every single time Israel has launched an attack in Gaza. They've been out in the streets in large numbers, waving Palestinian flags. For 20 years, on at least 10 or 15 different occasions. Where were those people when that was happening? Did they fail to recognize that these people were your neighbours who were simply taking a stand against the brutalisation of innocent people in Palestine? That they had no connection with, but simply recognise a massively unequal conflict where one side is getting horribly abused by the other, and knowing that the governments of the country they lived in Western Europe supported Israel. So they were out to support the Palestinians. They've done it every single time. And surprise, surprise, lo and behold, when Israel launches its biggest ever massacre of Palestinians, the same people come out in the streets.
And more.
For the 20th time. But
same,
more because it's on bigger scale. The same people come out in the streets. But suddenly now those people have suddenly been transformed into just off the boat immigrants, transgender, social justice warrior, anti-patriarchy, feminist, radical feminist, Marxists. That's it. That's all they are.
Yeah.
The people who have only really existed from Peterson's perspective for about 5 or 6 years, they only came on the scene 5 or 6 years ago. That's why Peterson came on the scene. These social justice warrior, Marxist types came on the scene. They somehow have suddenly overtaken a long-standing pro-Palestinian movement within European cities. And that's all it is now. The two are exactly the same. Anybody who supports Palestine is a radical Marxist, social justice warrior, snowflake, transgender, Black Lives Matter, just off the boat immigrant. That's
what they're claiming.
That's what they all are.
You zoom in on the footage or the photos they use to highlight that.
Yeah.
And it's all white people, or mostly.
I know. The same as always. So these people are people like Peterson who have that take and lots of others. They're just their ignorance just staggering. I can't believe that they're not disingenuous. I can't believe that they don't know that they're lying.
It's worrying because whatever they thought about it before, if they ever noticed it before, what they're doing now is they're othering their neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
They're othering them. Literally seeing the sea of protesters and going, they don't belong in our country. It's got to the point where political leaders in Europe are now comfortable calling for mass deportations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that'll be of the migrants. But in the United States, I think, did Trump do it as well? No, DeSantis did it. Anyone who's caught at a pro-Palestine march can be deported if they're not an American citizen or something like that. But that's one step to actually othering actual American citizens, your fellow white neighbors and so on.
Yeah.
It's quite crazy what's happened, but what this speaks to is that this did not just appear suddenly this month. Or maybe you were arguing otherwise with me last night.
There were no transgender people, no social justice warriors, no radical feminists, no, what do they call themselves? What's that radical feminist group? There were no naked women showing their boobs or people with pride flags in dog collars and gimp suits at any of the pro-Palestinian marches over the past 20 years. This is the first time that they're at them, or we're being told that they're at them.
I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
What?
These current protests? Have you seen anything like that?
No, but that's what I'm saying. The media is portraying,
right.
And all of the pundits are saying that this is what it is.
Right.
This is what pro-Palestinianism is.
Right.
In Western Europe, pro-Palestinian marches are radical lefty snowflake, social justice warrior, bury your boobs, dog collars, and tear down the patriarchy and destroy all the statues and pull it all down. Destroy everything. None of those ideas have had anything to do ever with any pro-Palestinian march up until today.
Yeah.
Fact. And they don't today either, but we're being told they are. To demonise pro-Palestinian marchers and the pro-Palestinian cause. Anybody who says, like you just said, they want to kick you out of the country if you're pro-Palestinian. And what does it mean to be pro-Palestinian? I'm not pro-Palestinian. I'm anti-slaughter of innocent people. Is that an anti-democratic value? Is that an anti-Western value?
Apparently, yeah.
To be against the slaughter of innocent people?
That's what the patriarch is saying now. I'm worried about this thing by Schultz. Like, maybe it's just virtue signaling, but he said it this week. I want mass deportations of illegals. This is kind of what the nativist white in Europe and the United States has wanted to hear from their leadership since 2015.
Mm-hmm.
He's gifting it to them now, at least at the level of rhetoric. And they're like, yes, This is it. This is really like we could yet get the right wing backlash that they're all wishing for, but they don't understand. You know, they don't understand what it implies. It's going to imply a backlash against their ordinary people standing up just for not even for anything idealistic, just the basic simple things. Anyway, yeah, and then in Germany, the actual, I don't have.
You don't have it, no?
I have it in German.
No, well, whatever. Anyway, yeah, it's enough just to mention.
The opposition leader goes one further than Chancellor Scholz, and he says, not only does he support mass deportations of illegals, i.e., Muslims, because they're in this narrative, they're feeding into these anti-Semitic protests against Israel, right? He says, I want anyone coming into the country in the naturalization process to declare that they agree that Israel has a right to exist, and to commit to Israel's security, quote, which is ultimately the raison d'etre of Germany. Anyone who does not sign this when they become a citizen or when they get residency in Germany or asylum has no place in Germany.
Did you get some kind of genocide?
It's like
Holocaust guilt or something? Is that what that is?
The right-wing nativists have finally got their wish, or we're on the cusp of it being offered to them, which is what they wanted all along. But the catch is that it places Israeli.
The Israeli agenda.
You can get everything you want, but Israeli nationalism is what you're signing up for, not German nationalism, not America first. It's
you're signing up for xenophobia, which is what the nationalists and populists have always been accused of. That they're xenophobic, they hate the other, they hate the immigrant or whatever. When that's not the case, they simply don't want a wholesale erosion of the cultural values with which that are part of their country and part of their identity. They don't want the erosion. It's just because I want to protect something doesn't mean I want to kill someone else or attack someone else. I want you to stop attacking me. But what it's been twisted into is that you have to. No, that's not enough. If you want to support your own national, cultural kind of values and protect them, you have to do it in the context of hating the other.
Yeah.
Hating any immigrants, hating Palestinians, hating anybody we want you to hate, basically.
Yeah.
So you have to be, you can't have this genuine, heartfelt, old-time, conservative, cultural, even Christian, whatever, Christian light, whatever values. You can't have that. It has to be hate-filled. It has to be filled with hate for the other. You have to have a siege mentality. You have to be at war, basically, if not physically, in your mind. Yeah. Always with someone else, with others, and that's what they want, and that's the deal they're trying to force on them.
Ideally, the other would be Muslims, because Arabs, because Palestinians. Mm-hmm. It all is to do with lining up with Israel's needs.
Yeah, which is bizarre. That little country in the Middle East. What's that got to do with German values, really? Some Holocaust guilt, maybe, or something. But anyway, there's just one last thing I want to subject you to another piece of
not from Peterson.
Wisdom from Peterson, and then we'll be done.
God, it's the suit. I can't stand the suit.
Said that your moral back is up because of the continual toll in civilians in Palestine, especially among people who, let's say, weren't even born when they first came to power. And so it's very difficult to look at that and see it as anything but unjust. But then it begs a whole other set of questions too, doesn't it? It's like, well, if your government is a totalitarian band of armed criminal thugs, what responsibility do you bear for that as the subjected people? And it's not like I know the answer to that, but I see in my own country, in Canada, that things are slipping and sliding in all sorts of pathological directions, and people are letting it happen. And if you let that happen long enough, well, things get very, very bad. And they have got very, very bad in Palestine. And the answer to whatever tyranny Israel might be exerting over the Palestinians isn't for the Palestinians to exert even more tyranny over themselves, especially not in concert with a third party like Iran, who's perfectly willing to sacrifice them at any point. And so now, and then that question emerges, well, what responsibility do the Palestinians bear? Well, then I think we start to touch on more metaphysical issues. It's like, well, the Palestinians, like all people, bear the responsibility to live in truth and to stand up to tyranny in their deeds, their attention and their deeds and their actions. Because if you don't, you pay for that, and so do your children, right? And then so do your grandchildren, and so do your great-grandchildren. And, you know, there seems to be something unjust in that why did the children suffer? And the biblical answer to that has always been, well, the children suffer for the sins of their forefathers. And you might think, well, it's pretty unfair that the world is set up that way. It's like, hey, it might be unfair, but it is set up that way, and it does beg the question. What responsibility do the people who are living under the thumb of totalitarians have for the fact that they're living under the thumb of totalitarians? And the answer isn't none.
Okay.
This is like the white man's burden. This is exactly 19th century rhetoric that they use for the scramble of Africa.
Yeah.
Like what burden? Half of the population is under 18. So what responsibility do you have for your leadership? You're talking to minors right there. Secondly, you're lecturing down. You're punching down, as they say. You're lecturing down at people whose suffering is quite unparalleled in any other situation in the world. That's why this relatively small countries, two of them, get so much global attention. It's so stark. It stands out because the suffering is so high. And he's suggesting to them that they're not gleaning the right lessons from their suffering.
Which is that they're being made to suffer by Hamas. But he says, but it begs a whole other
he
set.
Did equivocate. He said, well, there's some tyranny, whatever tyranny of the Israelis are imposing, what about the tyranny from within?
But that's what he went on about, right? So whatever, whatever tyranny Israel might be exerting over the Palestinians isn't for the answer isn't for Palestinians to exert more tyranny over themselves, especially not in concert with a third party like Iran. So, who's perfectly willing to sacrifice them at any point. But his main point there was that it begs a whole set of other questions about, about if you weren't born when this all started and stuff. It's like, well, if your government is a totalitarian band of armed criminal thugs, that's Hamas. What responsibility do you bear for that as these subjected people? Already an assumption there that they're a band of armed criminal thugs who are just out for themselves, right? And it's not like I know the answer to that. Duh, you don't know the answer to a lot of things. But, I see in my own country, saying there's moral equivalency between the truckers' protest in Canada, because things are slipping and sliding in all sorts of pathological directions, and what's happening in Gaza, right? So the truckers having their bank accounts frozen is the same as being bombed to fucking smithereens by Israeli jets, right? Whatever tyranny might be exerted on the Palestinians isn't for the Palestinians to exert more. And he says it's like while the Palestinians, like all people, bear responsibility to live in truth and to stand up to tyranny in their deeds, their attention on their deeds and their actions. Because if you don't, you pay for that, and so do your children and your grandchildren. And all stuff. So he's kind of saying that his whole point here is that the whole problem here is that Palestinians are living under the tyranny of Hamas, and it's Hamas that are tyrannizing them indirectly by attacking Israel. So he's basically taking away any agency or any support from the vast majority of Palestinians in Gaza for any group amongst them or themselves taking up arms against Israel. The actual tyranny that is the tyrannical state that is imposing the suffering upon them. You know what I mean? It's so pathological the way it's paramoralistic.
It's nuts.
And he says he's like, yeah. Well, what responsibility do the Palestinians bear for being blown up by Israeli jets? Obviously it's their fault
for starting this, because he's going with October 7th being everything was relatively stable, and then they just started this out of nowhere.
I don't know why we're talking about him, because he obviously is massively clueless about it. But I just thought it was interesting because it's kind of like the dominant pro-Israeli narrative light in a certain sense, with a little bit of attempted nuance.
It's good that we hear him articulate, because There's a lot of people who think that. The core problem they have is that they assume Israel is just like Toronto, just like England, just like France. It's not. Listen to Gideon Levy. He's an Israeli journalist. He worked for Haaretz for years. I think he's still there. He says Israel is not a normal country. He says almost all Israelis literally see the Palestinians as subhuman.
And themselves as a chosen people. And themselves as
secular or religious, doesn't matter.
And themselves as perennial victims, he says, which is obviously true. And where's Peterson? Peterson should be all over that shit.
They are you could not have a better case study for perennial victims. ZJWs, that's what I call them, Zionist Justice Warriors. They are, but they don't see it, or they've been co-opted or polarized or whatever, and they're projecting onto something that is totally unreal. It's not the reality of that situation.
But we should probably, because here's an example. This is just this no more Peterson, but this is this kind of stuff that Peterson is subjected to. It's I think it was done by a Daily Show, to his credit, but because I think it was John Oliver or something with the Daily Show. Anyway, I think you saw this already.
Oh.
But it's just they put together a kind of montage of Fox News reporting on and this is real Fox News reporting on the Gaza conflict, and they just overlay at the front of it like Fox News Sports logo, whatever. Have a listen. It's bizarre.
All right, Fox and Friends starts right now.
Hey, this is going to be an unbelievable day of news, so don't miss a minute.
Israel against Gaza.
Point out the power players going against Israel. You got the West Bank, you got Gaza, but there's other players in this region. So let's break it down country by country. First off, look at this. Afghanistan, we know they're running for the hills because of the Taliban.
Iran, front and center.
Egypt is where they came up with the Muslim Brotherhood that gave birth to all these terror
Absolutely gave birth to all of it.
Let's back up and go over how we
Yeah,
got
started
here
by
and who
MI6.
the players are. First, let's look down. Outline, this is the size of Israel, roughly the size of New Jersey. What about Hezbollah? They're known as the gold standard of terror groups. Hamas is Shia. I think Hezbollah, no, you're right. Hamas is Sunni, and then Hezbollah comes up as Shia. Syria,
comes up as
enemy. They all love to kidnap, they all love to kill, they all like to horrify people, and they like to intimidate.
Fox Sports thanks you for watching this presentation of the National Football League.
That's basically Jordan Peterson's spiel there to Piers Morgan, just in a few sound bites on Fox. It's the same essential. It's mush for brains. It's so bad you can't even comment on it.
Anyway, I can't comment anymore.
Gold standard propaganda.
It's the gold standard for terror groups. They're the gold standard. I think I like these guys this season, Hezbollah, I like them this season. My money's on them. I think they're gonna play a strong game.
I think they're Sunni. No, you're right. They're Shia.
No, I like them even more then, because the Shias are always best.
The Shia and the Sunni together, well, whatever. They're usually against each other.
Anyway, my money's on those on that Hezbollah group this season. I've already put the bet down. I think they're going to come in strong. They're going to play a really smart, intelligent game. Could be some stiff competition from the Saudis, but ultimately I think the Houthis are gonna win it this season. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Here's Tom with the weather.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm done talking about this because
this, by the way, this is why the West is destroyed. Jordan Peterson's like the intellectual dark web. He's the best of us. This is why it's all going tits up. That's what intellectuals.
Well, they fail to understand what Peterson fails to understand, and all these people fail to understand about their Western culture that they're trying. Because that's the thing that joins them all. All the conservatives in the UK and in the US, they're all pro-Israel, and Peterson and his think tanks and all those kind of people, and Shapiro and all those other little buddies that hang out and have these talks about pushing back against the woke mob and stuff, and preserving Western cultural values and culture and civilization and stuff, is they don't realise, they don't understand, and in the process of doing that, they're demonising members of Western society who are taking a moral stance, a very simple, plain moral stance against the slaughter of innocent people, and they're attacking those people and demonising them. And in doing that, people like Peterson and the conservatives who supposedly want to uphold Western civilization are undermining it and destroying it, because the foundation of any society, no society can can form and be a productive, successful society without a solid moral foundation. That's the bottom foundation, is moral. And if that morality is twisted and distorted, then it will not stand, it will collapse. And right now, there's a very clear moral situation where Israel has for the past 4 weeks, every day, been slaughtering women and children and men, 4,000 children. And these people in the West, in the glorious, civilized, moral West, are looking at that and supporting the people who are doing the slaughtering.
Yeah.
And they think by doing that they're protecting their own civilization.
Yeah.
They're actually
Undermining it.
and furthering its decline. So, 2 men walk into a bar.
No, neither is Hamas, please.
You think at least one of them would have ducked.
That's true.
Boom.
Especially if one goes first.
Exactly. Anyway, that's all the news that's fit to just watch and go, oh my God, do I really have to even comment on this? Is it not obvious? But apparently it's not obvious, at least to some people. Anyway.
Buckle up, people. It's going to be wild. That's for sure.
Rock and roll. Rocky and rolly. Yeah, anyway, so we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for watching, listening. Hope you enjoyed the show and commenting. And we'll be back next week with another one on whatever, like I usually say, nonsense has been going on between now and then. So until then, stay safe and stay moral. Whatever. Bye.
See you next week. Thanks for watching.
Can't stop the signal now.